Een week na de opname schrijft ze: het was wel de pure vorm van egotripperij om uren te praten over mezelf en daarna dat ene lied te zingen in de zaal der zalen. Maar thuisgekomen in Engeland had ik goddank aannemers over de vloer die ons huis gaan verbouwen. Dat leidde me af van mijn zelfoverschatting na onze ontmoeting in het Concertgebouw. Ik heb 3 medicijnen tegen de imbeciliteit van aannemers. Prettig eten en drinken, Frank Sinatra en de nieuwe biografie van Peter Cook. Je moet wat, nietwaar? De humor van Catherine Bott is casual, kun je zeggen. Casual. Het woord is onvertaalbaar. Ze is de bescheidenheid zelf en ze heeft een stem. Als de engelen zingen met de stem van Catherine Bott, dan is het in het hiernamaals wel een paar weken uit te houden. Het Concertgebouw is voor de hele middag afgehuurd. Om er eerst wat te praten, wat te luisteren, waarna Bott tenslotte zal zingen. Een lied uit het begin van de 13e eeuw. Vin amour en espérance van Audefroy le Bâtard. Die leefde, zo wil de overlevering, van 1200 tot 1230. Ze heeft er lang over nagedacht. Een paar weken. Maar dit lied is het, schrijft ze tenslotte. Dit is mijn voorbeeld van schoonheid en troost. Het duurt een minuut of 5. Als het podium is leeggeruimd, als we wachten op de komst van Bott, is het krankzinnig stil in de zaal der zalen.
Wonderful to have it to myself.
It's a nice building.
With one of the best acoustics in the world.
And it's all yours. The whole long afternoon.
I know. I never dreamed of this. I mean, I've been up there with people down here, but there are a handful of us in the hall.
Yeah.
You can hear how good the acoustic is.
Yeah, if you sing one line now, you can hear it or not? Even here in the back.
I would think so. When I last sang here, I sang a very quiet and tender song by Purcell. And it was late November, which is the influenza season, and everybody was completely silent for the duration of the song. It's a very memorable evening, that. I thought, how quietly can I go to make them listen hard? And we all managed it, all together. It was great.
What was the song about?
Love.
As ever?
Yes. Love, and the singer hopes to be released from a real imprisonment, but also from the imprisonment of an unhappy love which is not reciprocated. So she's calling on the gods to bring her out of it. So very, very good combination. They're not tremendously distinguished words, but you put them with Purcell's beautiful tune, and it's a major miniature operatic aria. It's great.
Dinner in the diner, nothing could be finer than to have your ham and eggs and Carolina. It was your first, well, the first you thought of at the moment I came up with a Beauty and Consolation. One of the first.
Yes.
Why?
I've hardly ever told anybody, actually, but when I told my agent that this was what I had thought of, she said she couldn't stop singing the song either. Well, it was when I was quite a little girl, and I was staying with my grandparents. Now, like most people, I was born with two sets of grandparents, and I had a cuddly granny and a granny of whom I was very fond, but who wasn't cuddly unless I was clean and tidy. And my parents had both come from the same town, so my younger brother and I used to go and stay with both sets of grandparents. And I'd come from cuddly granny and was having my first experience staying all on my own in the rather smart spare bedroom with my other grandparents. And one night, in the middle of the night, I was awoken by the most terrible, frightening sound. I'm allergic to cats. We don't have any. And it's probably quite surprising, but we didn't have any cats living nearby. So I had never heard the sound of cats making love or courting or whatever cats do in the middle of the night. And there was this terrible meow, you know, like the cats in L'Enfant et le Sortilège. And I was so frightened because I knew the noise was coming from outside the house, but I didn't know what it could be. I was convinced it was coming to get me, and I was very, very, you know, how frightened you are when you're panicking. And I didn't really like to go and wake up Granny and Grandad. I didn't feel that they would appreciate this. If I'd been at home with Mum and Dad, I would have rushed into their bed. So what's that noise? But I didn't dare, so I thought, well, how do I make myself brave? And I thought I'd better drown out the sound, so I started to sing. Well, I liked singing. I had quite a nice voice, and I sang well in tune. And my other cuddly granny had taught me this song, which was the old jazz number, well, popular number, Chattanooga Choo Choo. And just the sound of that, I mean, it's a train in the title, isn't it? Chattanooga Choo Choo. I come from the generation that remembers steam trains. And so I started to sing it, because although I'd never heard it, except Granny singing it, I did know all the words. I don't know whether I can remember them anymore, but I said, "Pardon me, boy, is that the Chattanooga choo-choo? I've got my fare and $50 to spare." It was rather sort of tearful and weak, but after a while I realised I couldn't hear the cats anymore, so everything was okay, and I went right through the song. And I went right through the song again, and in the end, Grandad woke up, and he came to see, obviously, what the hell was going on, this little singing voice. And he turned out to be much more cuddly than I'd thought. And he said, "Don't worry, that's cats, that is." And he took me to the window. And I think we just saw the tail end of a cat disappearing. And they'd stopped making the noise. And I went straight back to sleep. And I thought of it when you got in touch, because my very first thought, when you said, you know, what in music says beauty and consolation, my very first thought was of a song from the Middle Ages, which is actually saying exactly that. I'm singing to cheer myself up. And it's a very beautiful tune and a beautiful poem, and the writer has written it to console himself in the absence of attention from his girlfriend.
We'll come to Fin Amour and Espérance later on. Stay with Chattanooga Choo Choo.
It's a very happy song. It's all about going home, isn't it, on a train, and dinner in the diner. Nothing could be finer than to have your ham and eggs in Carolina. I didn't know what Carolina was or where it was, but I knew it was a jolly good place. And it's just as simple as that. It's just one of those beautiful, familiar, comforting things.
Now you can still hum it, but not sing it. You don't know the lyrics by heart.
Not really anymore. I expect if I were to hear a proper version, like Glenn Miller or something, I'd be able to sing along.
Yeah.
Most of it.
Okay,
but it's not something I sing every day now. It just formed, it was a very valuable experience when I was 7. It was a very specific example of beauty and consolation in action, I think, because an attractive song, not everybody would find it beautiful, but my goodness, it was beautiful to me when it was the tune that came into my head.
You've had other examples of songs that had a particular meaning in your childhood.
Well, my granddad used to sing about how it wasn't ever going to rain no more, no more. But he was a bit of a liar, so I didn't believe him after a while. Songs in my childhood. Well, my parents loved classical music, and in fact, from a very early age, I was listening to a lot of classical music. The radio was generally tuned to the Radio 3, as it's now called the third programme, the cultural station. And it sounds very pretentious, but I mean, Mum and I used to play games about which key the next symphony would start in. Can you come in on the right note? And this sort of thing. I mean, it wasn't, I promise you, she wasn't doing it to make me a more educated child, not like these flashcards that people have now for their babies. It was just because she had a good ear and I had a good ear, and it was a very nice thing to do. So actually popular song didn't really, apart from Gran, come into my life much. I was a classical music listener until I discovered the Beatles at the age of 10.
You discovered the Beatles?
Yes, if
not
you
the
see what I mean.
Stones, the Beatles.
The Beatles, yes. The Stones were a bit dangerous. I knew they were dangerous. I remember seeing them and feeling quite uncomfortable in their presence. But I didn't know why, because I was only 10. And in those days you weren't supposed to know why when you were 10.
Were a tiny little pretty bourgeois kid, or...?
Yes, I was extremely sheltered, I think. I was probably quite an intellectual snob. I mean, when I was a small child, they thought I was very clever. They were wrong.
Why?
Because I was very precocious with language, and I read a lot.
You seemed to be clever.
So I seemed to be clever. I had all sorts of people. I mean, I wasn't trying to be, but people at school, she's very clever.
But this discovery of the Beatles, tell me.
Well, I was in
discover?
hospital. I went into hospital. I had pneumonia. I was quite a feeble child as well. So I was in hospital in a children's ward. And children's wards now, I think, are very friendly, helpful, positive places where parents are encouraged to come and stay the night. And they weren't when I was a child. Visiting hours were very restricted. And it was a very shocking experience because I was in a long ward. I wasn't feeling at all well. I was woken up in the middle of the night to be given injections. I was on large amounts of antibiotics and generally feeling poorly. I wasn't dangerously ill, but I was poorly. And I was there with all sorts of children whom I'd not encountered before. There was a little boy who swore all the time. I mean, I learnt to swear when I was in hospital. I was so shocked when I heard my first swear words and realised somehow that they were swear words that I had to hide my head under the covers, which is rather shocking given how much I swear nowadays, but it was a shock then. And there was another little boy whose mummy had gone away. She'd gone out to buy food and had never come back, and I'd never encountered that. I didn't know anybody who hadn't got two parents. And then there was another child who had a transistor radio and who listened to the Beatles. And I went into hospital, a very prim and proper little thing, and I came out swearing and listening to pop music. And my father took a long time to recover.
From that?
Yes.
But do you remember the first songs you heard from the Beatles? Or was there any particular song in hospital you remember?
No. It's all a bit of a blur. But this was early Beatles. I mean, this was She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand. And those sort of songs, when they were new. In fact, I went to see the Beatles in concert when I was 11 years old, and my parents were praised by their friends for being so brave as to let me go to a pop concert. And everybody was screaming. I thought this was very silly, because at that stage, although I was keenly aware of how incredibly sexy they were, in a rather infantile way. I mean, I think they were deliberately presented like that in the early days of their career. I was aware of that, but I couldn't quite put it into words, and I was more interested in their music. My response initially, I think, was to the sounds they made and the words they sang, and I was very annoyed at the concert because everybody just went, ah! So I tried it in the end, see how it felt. It was very unsatisfying.
Okay, listen.
Yeah. if I can get the words right. No.
Step aside, partner, it's my day. Bend an ear and listen to my version of a really solid Tennessee excursion. Pardon me, boy, is that the Chattanooga choo-choo? Yes, yes, track 29. Boy, you can give me a shine. Can you afford to board Chattanooga choo-choo? I've got my fare and just a trifle to spare. You leave the Pennsylvania station at 3:45. Read a magazine and then you're in Baltimore. Dinner in the diner, nothing could be finer than to have your ham and eggs in Carolina. When you hear the whistle blowing 8 to the bar, then you know that Tennessee is not very far. Gotta keep it rolling. Ooh, ooh, Chattanooga, there you are. There's gonna be a certain party at the station.
Do you know it?
Satin and lace. I used to call Funny Face. She's gonna cry until I tell her that I'll never roam. So Chattanooga choo-choo, won't you choo-choo me home? Chattanooga, Chattanooga, get aboard. Chattanooga, Chattanooga, all aboard. Chattanooga, Chattanooga. Chattanooga choo-choo, won't you choo-choo me home? Chattanooga choo-choo.
Well, what kind of kid were you? Shy?
Oh, it's a long time. Shy, yes. Yeah. My parents are both shy. And there came a point in my late childhood when I actually decided that one missed out on quite a lot by being shy and that I must try not to be. So I worked on it, and I would now describe myself as shy sometimes with a showing-off streak. Otherwise, I wouldn't do what I do. And I did have...
You simply decided to stop being shy?
Well, no, you can't do it like that.
Tell me how.
But I'll get there.
Yeah.
I used to be picked out at school to read poems in school concerts and to read a lesson at the carol service and that sort of thing, because the teachers thought I had a nice, well-spoken voice. I don't speak with the regional accent of the area in which I grew up, and as you know, England is very divided by accent. So if you speak with a regional accent, you can quite often find yourself being slightly, subtly discriminated against, which is wrong, but that's how it is in England, unfortunately. And I didn't have it. I spoke, I suppose, BBC English with my little piping voice, sounding rather like the Queen when she was young. And I used to find these really nerve-wracking. And I had to recite a poem by A.A. Milne, who wrote Winnie the Pooh and all that sort of stuff. I can't really remember much of it because I think I'm probably still in denial. Because it goes, I've had my supper and had my supper and had my supper and all. I've heard the story of Cinderella and how she went to the ball. It's a little child falling asleep slowly. It's pretty twee, pretty grim. And I found myself doing this without really, knowing why. And I was so nervous when it actually came to the concert that I went, I've had my supper and had my supper and had my supper and all. I've heard the story. And my mother, who was, I think, possibly quite ambitious for me in this area, without communicating this to me, decided that it would be a good idea for me to have what she called speech and drama lessons, because I don't know how it works in Holland, but elocution lessons are usually for rather vulgar people who wish to stop speaking with a regional accent. So these were called speech and drama lessons. And I mean, I did take to them like a duck to water, and I was able to slow down and deepen my delivery. It wasn't quite like Lady Thatcher, but but I did realise that it was perfectly okay, and that was part of my realising that, in a way, I don't think I consciously realised it till much later. Being shy is actually a tremendously vain thing to be. I mean, being self-conscious assumes that everybody's looking at you. And of course, if you get up to say a poem, they are. But actually, there can be a pleasure in that. And the next time I did something, I read a lesson in the school carol service, and everybody said how nice it was. And Mum said it hadn't gone too fast this time, and I hadn't sounded all gabbly and short of breath. And I realised that it was quite a nice thing to do, because people liked listening to it. Quite recently, I saw an interview with the comedian and writer Victoria Wood, who is the same age as me. We've never met, but she is the same age as me. Mm-hmm. Had we been at school, we'd have been in the same class. And she said that she is shy. And of course, everybody says, oh, you can't be shy. Look at all the funny things you do on television. Victoria Wood is shown in Holland, isn't she? I mean, she's very, very popular and very observant writer. And she said that she likes doing stand-up comedy in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people because she thinks that shy people like to choose and control the moments when they are on display. And people who aren't shy are often brilliant at a party or something like that. And shy people are perhaps not so good, and then they can get up and sing in the concert cabal. But then you sort of feel you're in charge. I mean, by definition, now that I do what I do for a living, most people, except possibly one or two music critics, have paid money to come and hear a nice piece of music which they expect to enjoy. So they're sitting there thinking, I'm going to have a good evening out. And they might be disappointed, but basically their attitude is quite enthusiastic until they decide they don't like me. So that's very that's okay, and I don't know how much of that I ever thought consciously. I'm probably rationalising it with hindsight, but I decided to stop being so pitiful, because I was realising that actually being in little school plays and school concerts was rather good fun. In fact, I think I became quite a show-off by the time I was about 11. And then I had it knocked out of me again, so that was that was okay.
When you're down and out, are you down and out sometimes, or do you have a very pleasant life and no tragedies and no sentiments of...
I'm very lucky.
Oh my God.
Wrong
question.
What? No, I am very lucky. I'm very, very happy in my personal life. I wasn't always. I am now and have been for a while, and trust that that this will remain. And I find domestic contentment, to put it possibly like George Eliot would, a source of immense security for the rest of life, because I'm a self-employed person in a competitive, precarious career which won't last as long as if I were a businessman or a conductor or a concert pianist. I mean, you don't sing, or I don't want to sing for as long as Yehudi Menuhin can play in my life. So for me, peace and quiet at home is immensely satisfying and helpful. So
Cooking,
I'm not
cleaning,
no.
Domestic life.
No, when I say domestic life, I mean eating and drinking well, and having somebody to share everything with, and having a great time. I think he does more cooking than I do, and no, I don't do any cleaning either. So when I say domestic, I'm using it in a perhaps I should say personal. So I'm not very often down and out but I wouldn't say there haven't been times when I have been, so I can remember it.
And can
clearly.
you remember what was the consolation at those particular moments? Music?
Well, there are all sorts. It's not always music by any means. No. I think, in fact, if you're really blue, really, really fearful, you know, you haven't got any work, or I think the most specific thing that happens to me is that if I get a cold, which I don't often, as you can imagine, a perfectly calm singer can be reduced to a neurotic inferno of fear and doubt and chemicals, you know, potions and vitamin pills and inhalations and things. Unfortunately, I mean, partly because, you know, I had pneumonia when I was a kid, maybe my lungs aren't quite what they should be. I don't know. I don't very often get colds. I'm pretty fit and healthy. But if I do get a cold, it can sometimes take me 2 or 3 weeks to get it out of my system. And I think if you talk to most singers, we've all got an individual slant on why getting a cold is a sort of Greek tragedy. And it's very hard to be very cheerful because there are lots of reasons. I mean, you don't feel well. You don't know when you'll get better. If you have to cancel engagements, you're letting a lot of people down and being a nuisance to people because they have to scurry around and find a replacement. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm irreplaceable, because nobody in the arts is irreplaceable.
You are.
If soprano A is not available, soprano B will probably do a very, very good job. And maybe there's one person who is really fed up that soprano A wasn't there. But nobody's irreplaceable. And but you do know you're being a nuisance, you know, promoters, conductors. I mean, 18 months ago, I caught a cold in the middle of a tour, and I completely lost my voice. I got a major throat infection. My throat went the colour of the seats in the Concertgebouw, and I had to cancel the last concert, which not only meant that everybody had to scurry around and find somebody at very short notice, at the height of the busy festival season, but also that the entire orchestra had to rehearse the whole programme all over again with a different soprano. And so, you know, you do feel guilty about that. You think, I'm inconveniencing a lot of people. And then, of course, it's quite simple. You're losing money. And that can make a girl feel pretty pretty miserable. And I would say that at that time, you don't go for anything profound. That's not when you reread Middlemarch. That's not when you put on the greatest Schubert sonata. That's when you watch a soap opera on TV, or I mean, it sounds extremely frivolous, but sometimes the greatest morale booster is to have a manicure or eat some Japanese food or have a bit of a treat. And then it does need to be beautiful. I mean, it's better to go out and eat a plate of sushi if that's what you like, which I do very much, than go out for a hamburger. Because part of the beauty of Japanese food is its presentation, and you have to sort of, you just feel better for looking at it and then eating it. I mean, that's one example. And buying your stuff. I mean, I bought this scarf, which is Japanese, although I bought it in England. It's by a designer called Isamiaki, who is one of my favourites. I bought this scarf when I was recovering from illness. I was actually down by 3 or 4 concert fees. I couldn't actually afford it. Well, I could, but I probably shouldn't have done. But it really cheered me up to buy it. Now, that's not a very lofty thing, is it? But it's partly why I wore it today, actually. I mean, I think it's a rather wonderful garment with a life of its own. And the minute I saw it, I just had to have it, and it made me feel better. So that's what I do. Or I read comforting old books. I mean, children's books. I've got all the books I had as a child. And I was a very keen reader of all sorts of things.
You reread them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What happened?
If I'm in bed, I read C.S. Lewis and E. Nesbit and the classics that I loved as a child. They're very
Magic
reassuring.
City.
They're taking you back to another world where it really doesn't matter about the fact that you've got a red nose and runny eyes. And in fact, I have a feeling that it's a sort of generality. I suspect that the consolation of beauty is also the consolation of familiarity. I do think, I mean, I've thought a lot about this project, I mean, ever since you and I first spoke. And I have a feeling that I'm much less exploratory as I get older. I certainly don't call myself well-read anymore. I mean, I think until my early 20s I was a well-read person. I don't think I am now. I do find it difficult to find the time. And I have a nasty feeling that I tend to return to some old favourites.
Why?
I don't know why. I don't know. It's just, it's like sucking your thumb. I mean, I never did suck my thumb, but it's... I mean, I don't immediately think I'm 8 years old again. But it can be quite nice to read a book or to hear a piece of music knowing what's going to happen next. And you can just snuggle down and perhaps remember what it was like the first time you read it. I really don't know. I mean, I've tried to think why it should be, and I think possibly it's a rather infantile streak in me, and maybe other people don't do it. And I don't do it very often, but I mean, there's another thing. I wanted to bring you some examples, but I'm afraid they're all in a warehouse in Oxfordshire while my roof is put on. Rupert books, which I don't know whether that's a peculiarly English phenomenon, but there was once a very innocent man, Mr. Bestall, who wrote rhyming couplets, text, and drew little pictures that were then watercoloured in, usually by the staff, and he did it all for a newspaper. And he was a very innocent man, and he only died in the late 80s, very old, in his 90s. And I mean, I saw him interviewed on the television, everything I've ever read about him. He was a child. He was a true innocent. He wasn't an idiot savant or anything. He was an innocent man with an artistic talent. And he spent his whole life, really, devoted to this little comic strip about a little bear who lives in a landscape which is recognisably English or Welsh. And if you meet anybody, they think they know where this little village is. And I had these books, the stories read to me before I could read. And I've got all the books that I had when I was a kid. And that's another thing. I think that probably says something extremely peculiar about me, that if I'm really feeling low, I read a Rupert book, don't you think? I shouldn't be admitting it, but but it's true. I seem to be admitting anything to you.
What's happening? You're reading this Rupert book, Rupert Beer.
Yeah. Well, they're
not 8 again.
No, no. But I mean, actually, the Rupert books are very beautiful. I mean, the quality of the illustrations is very fine. There's lots of lovely detail. It's an evocation of the English countryside, which is actually very comforting if you're stuck in London, for example, because a lot of the English countryside does still look like it. The rhyming couplets are they're very clever, but they're not great poetry, and so there's a sort of adult pleasure in laughing at the complexity. I mean, there's one that, when I was very small, every time my mum or dad would read it, I would say, again, again. And the whole family remembers it. And I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Mrs. Bear has gone to hospital, and Mr. Bear goes to visit. And Rupert has made a jelly for when she comes home. And the couplet says, when father goes out on his visit, he says, so that's the jelly, is it? But we're back to Chattanooga Choo Choo. It's got a rhythm. When father goes out on his visit, he says, so that's the jelly, is it?
Yeah, you can easily sing it.
And for a small child, I just love that. Hundreds of years later, it still makes me smile. And I think, you know, so there are adult pleasures and childish pleasures in reading children's books. You can't pretend to be 8 years old, but you can remember how you felt when you discovered the books for the first time. Part of the essence of finding consolation in the beauty of something for me is perhaps not really being able to analyse it, or not quite understanding what it's about. Mm-hmm. So it's about emotion and not intellect. I think it's if you're lucky, you can find a great deal of, not consolation, you don't need consoling, you can find a great deal of happiness at waking up with the same person again. And certain routines, I think. I wouldn't perhaps say they were beautiful, but they're pleasing.
Very consoling.
They're pleasing. It's very nice that he usually gets up first and makes freshly squeezed orange juice. I like this very much. I think
Well, you're not getting bored.
No, I'm not getting.
My friend, my partner, is a source of beauty and consolation. But oh my God, here he is again.
No, I'm not.
No.
No, that's why. That's why I say I must be lucky, and I tend to find myself when my young relations say that somebody says, "Oh, my boyfriend, he's just so nice." I say, to a certain extent, there is no such thing as too nice in a man. I have a feeling that a lot of people seek out people who perhaps aren't really kind enough to them because they think of it as being more dangerous and more exciting. Well, I've done that, and I'm not ever bored. There was always something. I think if you are in if you're a couple for a very long time, it's like owners and their dogs. You start to.
Yeah.
If you don't perhaps look like each other, but I mean there are so many. If you're lucky, there are so many boring little ways that sometimes we do pull ourselves up. We say, "My God, we're dull," but we know we're not really. Other people probably think we're dull, but we're not dull to each other. So that's well, I mean, this morning wasn't terribly good because I had to get up early. I mean, I had a nice concert last night. No big deal, just a sort of concert. It wasn't one to get tremendously excited or adrenalized about. I had not too late a night after a lengthy discussion about the fact that I bought 3 more hardback books yesterday and Stephen thinks we haven't got anywhere to put them. And I was proposing where we should put some new bookshelves. I mean, what we were doing at midnight talking about that, I do not know, when I had to get up at 6:30, but that's what we were doing. And he doesn't mind really. I mean, he reads them too, so it's just a sort of long-running tease.
George Steiner wrote, "Song leads us home to where we have not yet been." Is this too romantic?
No, but it's much cleverer than anything I can think of to say. I'm terribly.
It sounds clever.
I'm so impressed with people who can put that kind of concept into words. He's absolutely right. And if ever I think of anything clever like that, I shall jolly well remember it and use it at every opportunity.
Yeah.
I can't be like that.
Well, let me try another quotation, somewhat more vulgar. He wrote, "Blindness is horrible, but I ask myself whether deafness would not be the darker darkness." Talking about music and the ability to hear music.
Yes, I think so, but I would. Well, I mean, you can't. Comparisons are odious here, I think, but it wouldn't be just music that I'd miss. It'd be inflections in people's speech, and how you can tell when somebody like you telephones, you think, "Oh, this guy's okay," How you would miss that? I mean, it's not just looking at people and what their faces look like and how they dress and how they present themselves. It's listening to how their voices work. Perhaps the musicality in people's voices. That would be awful to do without that, wouldn't it? But I haven't got an aphorism. I don't. I'm just not clever enough for aphorisms,
Yeah. Well, there was an evening you had throat infection, and there appeared a certain Mr. Radu Lupu with Schubert, piano sonata and B-flat major, D960. What happened?
Well, I've already said that I think of myself, probably wrongly, as a fairly equable sort of person. I mean, I like to try to enjoy life. But if I'm ill, and if I'm worried about whether I can do what I'm being paid to do well enough, I do feel much more self-absorbed, hysterical and neurotic. And I thought I was entirely better. Sometimes flying can dehydrate. It's very drying on all the soft tissues, isn't it? I used not to think this, but it is really true. It's better not to fly and then sing immediately, because no matter how much mineral water you drink, you feel dry. And I wasn't as better as I thought I would be, and I flew to Salzburg to sing in the festival. And I flew with the countertenor Michael Chance. I've worked with him quite a lot, and we're friends. And we got to our hotel and discovered that Radu Lupu was playing that evening. We weren't working until the next day. And he was playing an all Schubert program in the Festspielhaus. And we just said, well, this would be a treat. And I thought, well, yes, I really must go and hear this. It's very hard to arrange to go to concerts. And the thought that there were in fact tickets available at a considerable price. But much to our surprise, there were tickets available. And the way my life goes, I do find it very difficult to book tickets for the ballet or for concerts or anything weeks in advance. Something always seems to go wrong. And something changes and I can't use them, or my partner can't come, or something. And so I tend not to go to restaurants that you have to book ahead. And there's a lot of things I miss, actually, because I couldn't get it together to book it. I just need to turn up. And on this occasion, we were able to just turn up to hear Radu Lupu. And we both made sure we were nicely turned out. And this is important because I'd not been to Salzburg before, and Salzburg at festival time is really, it's quite a place. Mm-hmm. I don't think really we're talking much spirituality or culture. We're talking money and status and all sorts of social things that we can't really understand. And I also remember that we got to the Festspielhaus and we were both extremely smartly dressed in designer label clothes. And I only mention this not to show off, but I say that the hostility with which we were greeted by all the other members of the audience as we walked through the Festspielhaus was quite marked. And the reason was because Michael, although he was wearing an extremely beautiful and expensive Italian designer suit, was not wearing a tie, and I was wearing a very expensive designer trouser suit, and I appeared to be the only woman in Salzburg who was not wearing a skirt or a dress. And there was this very definite feeling that we both commented on, that we were being looked at askance because we weren't smart enough for this concert. So we went in feeling slightly rebellious. Thought, who are these people? And we sat in our seats, and I suddenly thought, I should have brought some cough sweets. What if I cough? The great English fear of embarrassment coming to the fore. I'll cough in the slow movements, I thought. What shall I do? I thought, I think I can do, So I went and sat down. And then on to this enormous stage, I mean, it seems like a mile walk, came Radu Lupu, dressed in tails, but walking in a very unassuming, sort of slightly rolling way. He sat down on a plastic stacking chair. Not a splendid, plinth or anything like that. I mean, presumably that's an eccentricity of his. I can't imagine that in the whole of Salzburg they only have plastic stacking chairs for pianists to sit on. He must have chosen it. It wasn't wished on him. But it looked very incongruous with this glorious piano. And then he just played. And it was only after the concert was over that I realised that I'd been somewhere else. Well, I hadn't coughed. I don't think I breathed. I don't think I really breathed at all. I would imagine my pulse rate went down to almost nothing. Because unusually there was that. I mean, professional musicians find it very hard to find this, because we're inevitably more cynical and more detached, and we are viewing concerts that we go to with a professional eye. You can't help it. You probably, watch television in a different way from.
I don't watch television.
Fine, but I bet the crew are very critical of camera work, and sound. You just can't. It's part of the job. But Lupu absolutely suspended that, and I mean I don't know him at all. I've never met him, but I just felt, and it's going to sound possibly pretentious, but Michael and I both felt really, truly privileged to be in that hall. We wouldn't ever have said it to him, but you sort of wanted to say, thank you very much for letting us hear you play. Because he, without, of course, saying a word at any point, he sort of invited us in to his world and to Schubert's world, and just made time stand still. And while his playing was going on, I completely forgot that I might have been worried about anything. And that was last summer. And it's really stayed with me. I haven't bought a recording of it. I have recordings of all Schubert's piano music by other artists, but I don't have him.
You didn't hear Lupu play again?
No, I probably shall, but...
You want to hear it?
Well, yes and no, but I don't really want a close-up, because when you played Chattanooga Choo Choo, I was sort of just wreathed in smiles because it's so brilliant and funny and clever, and that close harmony singing is such a delight. But I suspect I really need to sit there going, for this. But yes, but I mean, by all means, or insert it later.
I've got it here. Andante sostenuto? Oui?
Yes. In my dreams, I can play this.
This is the first time you hear it after you have been in Salzburg with Radha Lupu.
Yeah.
Here it comes.
child's tune, isn't it? A child's tune.
What about heaven? Did you ever have an image of heaven as a child or later on? Or that I paraphrase the question, what music must be played in the jukebox of eternity to prevent you from getting immediately bored?
Oh. No, anything will do, as long as it's not that, as long as it's on a long loop. You know, when you go to a restaurant and they play music and you suddenly realise that the Andrew Lloyd Webber tune has come round again, so it's obviously, I'm sure restaurants do it so that you'll leave. It's subliminally, you'll realise that here is "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" one more time, so it's time to get the bill. As long as it's not like that, I don't really mind, because I don't know whether there is a heaven. When I was little, I was entirely contented with the idea of clouds, thrones, angels, white-bearded man. That was fine.
What did the angels sing? What kind of music?
19th century hymns, English hymns. I loved singing hymns at primary school. And I don't know whether you know any of them, but I mean the English hymn tradition in the 19th century. It's immortal, invisible, and ye holy angels bright that sit on God's right hand, and things like that. I thought that was great. I mean, it's an impossible tune to sing. It goes, ye holy angels bright that sit on God's right hand. It goes all over. It's so hard to sing. Last week I went to the funeral of a neighbour who had died well full of years and had a very loving family. It was a Catholic funeral, and I don't know very much about the Catholic Church at all. And the abbot very kindly explained various things, because he guessed that most of the neighbours there were maybe 30 people there, most of the neighbours didn't know what to do. And he said, you know, the reason why the coffin has a white cloth on is symbolising her innocence, and this is to symbolise what happened when she was baptised. And it was very helpful. I can't remember much, but it did actually help at the time. And her family had chosen very traditional hymns. And I'm usually in a rather uncomfortable position, because of course I try not to make anything of it, but the neighbours have heard me singing around the place. And so it's expected, you know, they were waiting. And we had the last hymn of the service, beautiful traditional hymns, so I enjoyed that. I can sing them all. And we had to walk out through the church to a hymn called Lord of All Hopefulness, which is very, very cruel, because it starts off very low. It says, Lord of all hopefulness, Lord of all joy. And the key that's always chosen is, you think, this is so low, who can sing this? Whose gifts ever something... Oh dear, I'm so sorry, I can't remember all the words. It was 20 years since I'd sung it until last week. Be there at our labours and help us, we pray. At the start of the day. I mean, it goes over an octave and a half. And of course nobody could sing it, because the relations were all a bit too upset to have much of a voice. And I thought, this is going to be very conspicuous, but what would Kathleen have wanted me to do? You know, she said, oh, you've got a nice voice, she used to say. So I sang. It was very satisfying. Made me feel better. Thank you. I think I've just thought of an aphorism. I think that piece, I mean, to paraphrase George Steiner, I think that piece consoles you even if you didn't previously know you needed consoling. And there's a child's tune. So there's just sort of infinite feeling of safety within that movement, isn't there? It's just... I think it says it all, really. I possibly wouldn't need any other piece of music other than that sonata. That's a tremendous generalization, but if I really had to choose, and there, you know, I could only have one,
Then it's...
I think it might be that. I think I would want the whole sonata.
But if you could only get with you the Andante sostenuto, that's okay.
I think so, and I think I would probably ration it. I'd only play it, you know, once a year or something. If that was all I could ever hear again, save it up to be a treat.
Vin amour en espérance. True love has made me hopeful. Of beauty and consolation. This is your choice. Why?
True love has made me hopeful and given me the wish to sing to lessen the sufferings of love. I so enjoy the sight of her face that I willingly accept whatever she makes me suffer. Gracious and noble lady, I am yours, pitiless though you are. In many ways, it's a standard medieval song of the concept of courtly love. It doesn't really matter how deeply felt and sincere it is. It seemed to me when it came to mind so quickly that to sing for you, that true love is a good thing, is a beautiful thing. Singing is a beautiful thing. These two things will give this young man consolation in the face of rejection from his beautiful beloved. So that seemed to be the perfect choice of song. The very wicked reason is that the thought of singing an unaccompanied song all alone in this fantastic concert hall was just too good a chance to miss. Because normally, when I perform this music, I perform it in smaller halls.
Well, would you be so kind to go on stage?
Yeah.
And sing it?
Good. That was a really good shot. Do not take the tuning fork with you or carry it. Shall we do that again? I thought I'd secured it in the pad. So perhaps you want to... and I'll just do this round here as well.
Next time you just keep on running.
Yeah.
Without a tuning fork over there. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
My God, no.
Okay, your turn now.
I'm very sorry. I won't cough during your...
It's all right, you are allowed.
Evelyn Bott, would you be so kind to come on stage and sing Vin amour en espérance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fin amour en espérance, ma mise d'une vouloir, de chanter pour allégeance, des mots que m'y fait avoir. Celle qui bien au pour, dans une misère m'aggravante, sonore très au ciel. Par sa très douce acquaintance et par son bel décevoir, fit mes cœurs de moi sevrance et prit letzte soin manoir, taliblet manoir, qu'il aime de mourance, mais puis à retenance, ein struve orgueil danger, que me fait couleur changer. Souvent d'haïr et pesance, d'amour qui dans ce valoir, ora tourné à l'enfance, sa cointise et son savoir. Quand se met en nonchaloir, qui pour lui en mésistance, et se donner recouvrance, qui se peine de poésière, et de faux cœurs envoisières. Dame de bonne air et franche, bien me faites percevoir que finquer sans repentance ne m'y peut rien valoir. Votre séchie